The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group.
Enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
Welcome to And Good Company. I'm Sara Fiedelholtz, a conversationalist. I am pleased to have at this table Pastor Javier Mondragon, who is co-pastor with his wife of the Inner City Congregation Many Nations Church and is the founder of the Bridges of Grace Compassionate Ministries Center. Ephraim Smiley, who is the director of City Life 46806, which is an urban ministry group under the Youth for Christ ministry. And then Rena Bradley, who is the community director at Bridges of Grace centers.
You got it.
Great. Okay. So I got it. All right. So what I want to do is basically, I'm going to ask some questions, but I want to really open it up to conversation. So whenever you feel you want to jump in, go ahead. But to give a little bit of background about Bridges of Grace, so it's a nonprofit community development organization. So it was established in 2011. So you're really going to be coming up on your 10-year anniversary. Yeah. And you're really looking to transform neighborhoods through a relationship between the changing of the environment as well as through an integration of faith. Is that how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think everything starts with faith. So we're a faith-based nonprofit, and yes, so our mission is to transform Southeast Fort Wayne. But instead of doing it all at the same time, we decided to do neighborhood by neighborhood, and so we chose Mondragon Park Neighborhood Association, which is our immediate neighborhood.
Right, because you pointed out that there are 50 neighborhoods in Southeast Fort Wayne.
That's correct.
So how does Mount Vernon Park, which is the neighborhood of where you're located, how does it compare? Let's do before Bridges of Grace went into the neighborhood and now. How does it compare to the other 49 neighborhoods?
I think one of the things that we celebrate the most probably could be the reduction of crime. Since 2013, really, is when we started to measure what crime was in 2013 and what today is. And so the difference is 50 to more than 50% of reduction of crime in our neighborhood. In some areas, so more than 70%. And so that's part of it. But at the same time, I think the beautification, less houses that were vacant before, and now we've been acquiring those houses and fixing them up and then getting people to own those homes. Vacant lots that were before, overgrown grass or trash, people will dump their trash there. And so we started to acquire those vacant lots as well, and some of them now have playgrounds or just places where people can come and gather and have community.
And what would you say are the biggest issues and concerns for the neighborhoods on the southeast side, and how would you say that you referred to it as challenges? Yeah. What would you say are the community's challenges?
So, what we do at Bridge of Grace is we usually ask our community members what they feel are the biggest challenges. I moved into the neighborhood less than 5 years ago, so I didn't necessarily feel qualified to swoop in from the outside and say, well, you guys need to fix this, this, and this. But when we asked our neighbors what our community's biggest challenges were, what they told us was that they wanted to see their neighborhood be more beautiful. They wanted more chances to get to know each other. And then the third one was crime, which crime had actually fallen by the time I came to Bridge of Grace and to Fort Wayne. So that was an issue of perception. So I think when you look at our neighborhoods, there's often this perception that the people in that community don't care. And it couldn't be more false. But also, I think the people in our community need to know that other folk love and care about them and are willing to walk alongside them with getting that work done. And I still remember when I looked at our first round of surveys where we asked people, what surprised you? Did the reduction in crime surprise you when you learned more about what was happening in the neighborhood, or the number of kids? The number of vacant lots, what surprised you most? And when people wrote into what surprised them most, they said that you care. That you care. And so I think That's a major challenge. Just people knowing that other folks care, both from the outside and the inside, and that the neighborhood can change for the better, and that they can be a part of that change. And I think that we've done a lot at Bridge of Grace to help address that.
So clearly, I mean, you all have chosen a path of service. So how did you get to where you are on this path of service? I mean, obviously as a pastor, it's probably a little clearer what your mission is, but how did you two, let's start with you, Ephraim, how did you get to the path of where you are?
Well, for me, it started when just growing up on the southeast side and seeing my dad and my mother also give back to the community, working at Pontiac Youth Center and sacrificing so much of their quote unquote free time to uplift young people that did not have a support system that was healthy enough for them to overcome some of the factors that they were fighting against and not even knowing it most of the time. And so just seeing that example inspired me to be more active. At 18, I decided that I was going to become a teacher or a social worker or give my life to serving underprivileged youth. And the rest has been history pretty much.
But you started as a teacher, right?
Yes. So after graduating from Southside High School, I went on to Taylor University and majored in physical education. And then when I came back home, I immediately got into the school system and substitute taught, did some at-risk programs called Focus, and then eventually actually got into a gym class and was able to have a positive impact on young people who probably, I was their first African-American teacher, and even more so probably their first African-American male teacher that they had. So that was just an interesting experience and something that I cherish.
And then talk about how you got to City Life and what you do there.
Okay, in the classroom, there's, I feel, a limited amount of impact you can have because of the lesson planning, the different day in and day out responsibilities of a teacher that don't necessarily overlap with the needs that the kids express. And so therefore to be able to do some things in an after school setting allows time for more relationship and rapport. And I think organically and by faith, I just kept on looking for opportunities to serve at the grassroots level, and then eventually a door opened where I was able to not only have that impact, but also get paid and be able to take care of my family as well.
And so how did you, Rena, how did you get to the path of service? Because you were an architect.
Yeah, fancy I still am. But but that's huge, Ephraim. I do want to make a point. Like, I don't think I had my first Afro-American male teacher until I was in college.
Oh, wow.
And I went to Howard, and that's how that happened. But for me, I think my interest in architecture and in the design field was always about service and building community. I was a tree hugger in high school, back before that was cool, and cared deeply about the environment, loved the arts, loved math, loved science, and had an environment teacher who asked us what color the sky was in high school, you know? And so all of us were like, is this a trick question? You know, what do you mean, what color is the sky? Blue? And so he walked us outside and we looked at the sky, and it wasn't really blue. And then he asked us, how many of you guys have some form of lung disease, asthma, bronchitis, anything like that? And a full third of us. And he said that's normal here in Detroit because of how the built environment, because of the pollution that occurs in our community. And so it just hit me hard that our built environment really impacts us as people. It impacts our health. It impacts how we socialize with one another. And so I just figured, you know, well, if I want to work on buildings, I need to be an architect. And I didn't realize that a lot of the time architecture is really divorced from community and people in their engagement. And I didn't figure that out until the fourth year of my 5-year major. And so I finished, I went to a firm, worked on large hospitals because I was still in that line of health and helping others. But still realized that our community had no engagement. It had no opportunity to have input. And so then I worked at another job that was more community focused, but ended up not being as design oriented and focused, and finally found Bridge of Grace, and they were looking for an education programs coordinator. But but after some conversations with Javier and with Zeus, who was the ED at the time.
The ED is the education director?
The executive director.
Executive director. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So he was the executive director at the time, and we, found ourselves more or less on the same page of we do think, all three of us think that the built environment impacts people, it impacts culture, and I just saw it as an awesome opportunity for me to kind of marry my interest in health and well-being of communities and design, and frankly my faith, which hadn't really been an option any other place that I'd worked, and to do that with the community rather than just for or in a very top-down way. So that's how I landed at Bridge of Grace, but I think I always had that heart of service when it came to architecture and design.
But similar to when you were saying that, the first African-American teacher you had, professor, was in college, I mean, there probably were not a lot of, were there a lot of African-American architects?
Howard, yes.
At Howard, yes.
Right, okay, but when you went out.
But I was really fortunate. I grew up in Southfield, Michigan, and I grew up in a very black middle-class neighborhood. I kind of joke that my family's like the Brady Bunch meets the Cosby Show. That's us. So my neighbors were predominantly black and Jewish, and they were doctors and lawyers and engineers and newscasters and people like this. So I never had this conception that that there was something I couldn't be, because everyone around me, a lot of them looked like me and they were successful. So when I said I want to be an architect, people were just like, good for you. Right. And it wasn't until I graduated, actually, and then I went to Howard. So a lot of my classmates looked like me, a lot of my professors looked like me. At the time, they were saying that Howard graduated more Afro-American architects than all the other colleges combined, which I'm not sure if that's true, because Hampton University also has an architecture program. But, in the DC area is where a lot of them land. So when I first started working, I didn't see it there either. But when I came out, there was this copy of Architecture Record magazine that had this beautiful black woman on the cover, and this headline that 0.2% of licensed architects were black women. That's when it hit me, because I had no idea that the number was that small until then. Now I think it's 0.3, which means it's gone up a full 50%. Right. But it wasn't until then that I realized just how rare it was to find black women in our profession. So before that, I didn't know. I just wanted to do it, so I did.
And Javier, how did you you're from Mexico originally. Yes. How did you get to the life of service and to Fort Wayne?
Yeah, as you said, I think being a pastor, that was a calling. I knew that God was calling me to do ministry. I just didn't know where and how. And so I think yours is the same as Ephraim and Rena. The one thing I've learned is that your background has a lot to do with your passions and how you feel about, the problems and issues in your society. And so I would say that's when I came here to be a pastor. I didn't know that I was going to be doing what I'm doing right now. I really came to, out of the seminary thinking, this is the way I'm going to do church. But when I arrived to this neighborhood and the community where we were, with the challenges that I talked about a lot, those challenges became an opportunity for us to really be the church that I always thought, I really didn't think that we would do ministry this way, but I knew that it was going to be outside the four walls of the church. And I didn't know how, but thankfully God has led us into a path that has been impactful to bring hope and to people.
Why do you all think that so much of the transformation movement in communities and neighborhoods, or programs for the homeless, or people to help low income, a lot of them are mainly done by faith and religious organizations as opposed to, municipalities? Why do you think that is, and do you think that that's right? I mean, do you think that cities and municipalities should be stepping up and doing some of the programs or things that you're doing?
I think historically, Christianity, right, the Red Cross, I mean, those big organizations, big hospitals, right, that started doing that, they're mostly from churches. It was denominations or churches that started it. So historically, I think the faith has been one of the reasons why you do what you do to help people. I think the government tried too, and it's okay. I think there's a lot of nonprofits that are not faith-based and they do good work, very good work too. But I think for what I read in history too, a lot of community centers that started in New York or LA, when they started community centers, a lot of times those become the places or the hubs for
the gathering place.
Gangs.
Sure, yeah.
And gangs later because
Right.
there was not enough supervision. And so what I read too was like, wow, that's interesting too, to find out that, having community centers are good. But in these places like in New York and LA, when I was reading, that those places became the hub, and then that's where they started to gather and have those gangs because there was not enough supervision or programming for those. So we got to be careful of that as well.
Right, but it does become like a sense of place that they could have and to build around. But do you think that but cities, that they have a responsibility as part of city government to do some of the programs that you take on because no one else is doing them?
Absolutely, I think they have support. Support. We're all in favor, I think, of supporting the people who live in those communities that are experiencing the challenges that we talk about. If we can come alongside of them, and we talk a lot about how they are the experts of the solutions because they live there,
right.
and they care and they have concerns, and so they are those the ones that are experts in their communities. And so we have to maybe ask. So that's how I see the city. I think cities and governments, maybe it would be better to come alongside of those communities and see how they serve, they can serve.
Yeah, I think when you ask the question, my reinterpretation of your question is like, should it be government or should it be like faith-based or grassroots organizations? And I think the answer is yes. We should all be doing what it is that we can to help out. I think when it comes to faith-based organizations, churches, community organizations, we're on the ground. We see people, we relate to them every day, and I feel like that's our strength. I think governments are really great at creating overall programs in replication and structure and policy, where if somebody does something really well, you can create an opportunity for 20 more Ephraims to do what he does and do it well, or for 20 more Javiers, or for 20 more Renas to take that on. But I think sometimes it does feel like there's a rift between grassroots work and policy work. And I really wish there was more of a meeting together of those two things so that groups could coordinate and be more effective with one another. But I think, these challenges and issues that we face or that our communities face or individuals face, sometimes they're singular or they feel very individual, but a lot of the time there is that overlying structural issue. So I think if we can tackle it from both ends, could really make some tremendous progress.
And do all of you live on the southeast side? Where do you live?
I do.
Where do you live? You don't have just the neighborhood.
I live in the Mount Vernon Park neighborhood.
Mount Vernon Park?
Yeah.
I grew up on the southeast side, but I live by IPFW now.
But your family, do you still have family that lives on the southeast
yes,
side?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Do you think that makes a difference? Because, one of the things that they've been talking about with the whole idea of the police brutality and with policemen understanding the communities in which they're serving is to have them live within those communities. I mean, they can't legally do that. But do you think that makes a difference, that you talk the talk, walk the walk, you're living it every day, that you really understand what's happening within the community?
Well, I don't think you necessarily have to understand as much, but just to develop some relationships and some rapport gives that police officer in that split instance, like, some reference to make a critical decision as to how much force to use or to use force at all. But if you don't have any relationships in an area which you're policing, then the human instinct is to go to an extreme when that extreme might not have even been on your mind had you known the person. It's like, as a teacher, when I'm disciplining, the students that I have a better rapport with, I don't go as extreme or hard or, as hard line as, new students per se. A new student, I might raise my voice, I might use proximity, I might show that I'm in control, but a student I have a relationship with, we have an understanding to a certain extent, and therefore I don't feel I need to, draw a line in the sand, and we can communicate our way out of the issue as opposed to me exerting force to control the issue. So I would say rapport is just as vital. Like you don't have to know where these stores originated from or, this or that. It's just, having a rapport and a relationship with the people, the parents, the, ministers, just having a bead on the people that are in that community. So when things are difficult, you can talk as opposed to just resort to measures that might be unneeded.
I mean, I read also that, Javier, that you said that when you first started, when you went into the community and you were listening, you were asking people what was wrong, what needed to be fixed. And then you thought that you needed to change your approach and ask people what's right, and what they could do better. So I want to ask you all, what do you think are the assets? And what do you think that are the great things that are happening and are right on, in the southeast side, but let's particularly look at where your efforts are in the Mount Vernon Park neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't know, you want to start?
Our people, I mean, it's obvious. The people who live in our community, who care deeply, who are vested in the neighborhood. I mean, we couldn't do any of what we do. There'd be no neighborhood to serve. You know what I mean? If we didn't have the people in our neighborhood. I think untapped resources often come in the form of what look like challenges, and having the ability to reframe that is massive. But I know, people, when I first came, our youth are idle. They're not doing anything. And it's like, well, let's have some summer camps, And the ideas that poured out of our youth were so incredible that people tried to give me credit for them. Wow, how'd you get the kids to design that? Wow, how'd you get them to build that? And it's like, they came up with it. They came up with it. You just provide enough structure, they'll come up with it. A child who knows nothing about architecture and design will teach another adult how to use power tools and put something together within 5 weeks if you just give them that time and room to do so. So I think in a lot of our neighborhoods, in the way of our people, their talents, their skills, their passion, there's just so much latent, untapped potential. And we're just trying to drill into that a little bit. Forgive the mining.
I agree. I think that's key. It's the key is to see people different, right? To see them not as a problem but as a solution. I think that's huge. And then something that I love about the beautification and what we're doing with those vacant lots. I heard one of the judges here in Fort Wayne talk about the trauma that goes into those kids in these communities, mostly because of crime or something happened. Right across the street from our location, there was a vacant lot, and now it's a playground. And the history of that vacant lot was that the house that was there years ago was burned, and so it just went in fire, and they had to condemn the house. They took it down. It's a family member of some kids that I met when I first came. They were like 12 or 11 when I first came. And so, it was a traumatic event maybe for them, right, for what happened there. But now it's a playground, a place where now kids can play, right? And so those vacant lots, Rena talked a lot about how those vacant lots are challenges, right, because they're overgrown of the grass and the people come and dump the trash, but they can also be an asset. What if we turn it around and look at it as an asset? Right. So there are things in our community that you just have to look and see that they're there.
I would say, I'm biased, but Bridge of Grace and City Life and just holistic relational ministry, the humility to work with and not work for, and just letting people know they have a voice, empowering them to use that voice and know that great things can come from that. Having grown up on the Southeast and then being able to go to Taylor University and live on campus in Upland, Indiana, it was the first time that I went to sleep without locking my door. in the dorm. And it just showed me a new normal. It showed me possibilities that I never would have thought of. And that's why it's made me so passionate about providing a Taylor University environment for kids to come and enjoy, be it for 2 hours, 3 hours, just an escape to say, for them to enjoy kingdom culture, working things out, talking things out, negotiating, seeing things from other people's perspective, learning how to cope with trauma and different things they've seen, and learning how to get along with teachers and adults that might not understand where they're coming from, or might not understand why they go from 0 to 10 emotionally so quickly, and allowing them to really teach the teacher how to teach them so that they're not sent out every day. And just being a part of all of that process, I feel is something that ignites me, excites me, and gives me hope that we have so many people doing things like that and allowing kids to escape their environment while in it.
Right.
And so hopefully they come back and provide different platforms and organizations and programs that allow them to carry that torch and do the same for kids that might be in their sphere of influence.
Right. So what decade did you grow up on the Southeast side?
I grew up there from about 80 to 94. I was on the Southeast side.
So as an African American male growing up on the Southeast side, and with the issues of, the number that get into drugs or gangs and mass incarceration.
Yes.
How did you survive and make it through? And how many of your friends were the same? And what do you attribute that to?
Well, I attribute that to God, and God sending me two terrific parents that showed me a different way and demanded a different way from me. Anytime I brought street language or music in the house, they were adamant to say that's not how we do things. That is unacceptable in our house. Take that music back. You shouldn't be listening to it. Like, they drew a line in the sand and say, we have expectations, we have standards, and there is no ifs, ands, buts. There's no negotiation. This is how it's going to be in our house. Almost like in if we were to put it in a verse, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That was like plastered at our house, and I had to assimilate to what my parents were saying, as opposed to cower down to what my environment might be saying I should do or should be, or so forth. And so a love for basketball also helped me, because when gangs were meeting at the park I used to play at Weiser Park, I was making a beeline for the other direction. I'd get my ball and leave. And then when all the dust settled, I'd go back and I'd shoot around. And anytime there was drama, I'd get my ball and I'd just leave. While, some people didn't love basketball as much, or might have been more susceptible to being around others, even though they weren't doing something positive, and might have, succumbed to gang culture. And therefore, I've lost some friends that wanted to make quick money. I've lost some friends that were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the list goes on, incarceration and so forth. But having made it through all of that, the word says, to whom much is given, much is required.
Right.
So it only gives me more motivation to help be part of the change.
I mean, and a lot of it is that you're setting the standards and expectations of the community higher. I mean, like, you're not going to tolerate certain things or behaviors, or for them to, not care about the community or the streets or the lots or the children. I mean, so that you're, I think that a lot of times people forget to set the bar high. Like, people will meet it.
Right.
If you give them the right resources and tools to help them. But, we sort of live in this world of breeding like mediocrity and is okay and settling, but people will surprise you and rise to the challenge. And one of the things that I think was interesting is also for Bridges of Grace and City Life is that you're very much into the importance of leadership. And the role of community leadership, and you talk also about Indigenous leaders. So talk about the role of leadership and how it plays in the community, and this idea of creating Indigenous leaders and what that means.
I think for me the importance is because if we want for this change to be a lasting change, it has the grassroots. When you talk about grassroots, it have to be leaders multiplying themselves to other leaders, because when we're not here, then others are taking that baton and doing all the work. And so I think that's the only way. When Ephraim talks about not doing things for people but doing things with people, is because we need to have we need to be intentional about that leadership development of others, to be able to take those the things that need to be done. So I think for me, it's for lasting change. If you really want to have a legacy that will have a lasting change and will continue on, is you have to have that leadership intentional about creating leaders.
And what are Indigenous leaders?
Well, we define it as just leaders from that area, leaders from that neighborhood, taking on the onus to set the example and duplicate it, like bring some others along with you. And when you talk about leadership, there's a leadership that says, look at me, and there's a leadership that says, look at what needs to be done, and let's do this together, and let's humble ourselves, and let's be there for one another, let's have each other's back. The latter is the leadership that I think we all try to exemplify, encourage, and support as much as we can.
So what do you think are the qualities of a good leader today?
Willingness to listen and to be open to other people's ideas and suggestions. I think a lot of us have that image of, like, again, being this top-down leader who swoops in and does something, kind of bosses everybody around and whatnot. I don't know if it's like the orchestra pit leader, like, this is what you're all going to do. Yes, conductor. And I feel like good leadership, they say that, I can't remember who wrote this quote, but more or less that if you've led well, that at the end of the day, the people will say we've done it ourselves. And so I think that type of leadership is what's important, of not even just like we help equip and mobilize and re-energize folk in our neighborhood, but I think what we also do is help them realize their own God-given potential and power to do just that. You have that power within you. All I'm doing is providing you with a little structure to exercise it, or a little room to grow that, and to just kind of, as Hetra Bradley would tell me growing up, know who it is that you are. Don't you know who you are? And I feel like that's part of what we do, where it's just like, oh, wow, you're really great at that. You want to do more of that?
Right.
Here you go. Or you can grow this. Here's an opportunity to do that. So I feel like that's an importance of leadership, too, is just letting people realize they have the capacity. They have the capacity to create that change.
So more like a facilitator as opposed to a dictator. Yeah, that's what.
So you facilitate, and that's the idea. That's the idea of a teacher. Is a teacher facilitates you on, encouraging you to explore and be there to help you, but it's really self-guided.
Yes.
Do you think that because of the result that President Obama really started as a community organizer and leader, do you think that that's helped to spur people within a community to see the value of working within their community, but also being able to take that beyond their neighborhood to the larger community at large, or to get involved, on the city level and the county level and the state level and the national level? Do you think that that's helped for people to see the power and where it can take them?
I mean, I think so. President Obama, I think, was inspiring in a number of ways. Just that example of being able to see someone who looks like you in that position. As much as I feel like we want to say, oh, race doesn't matter and gender doesn't matter, but being able to see yourself in a position of power and authority and of doing good is tremendous. It's tremendous. So I think he was inspiring in that way. And yes, I think, there are people who tell me, I don't know if they tell you guys the same thing, but like, oh, well, President Obama started in community organizing. Like, this is really cool work. This is exciting stuff. And so I think it did raise the cachet of that event and raise the importance level of it. And I hope inspired some younger people to get into that field or to become involved in it and understand what a great impact they can make. So I guess I'm just saying yes. Did all of that help to inspire others and hopefully motivate others to do this kind of work? I sure hope so. And to scale it up? I sure hope so.
And then when you start to cultivate these leaders and people who are doing things in their community and they become successful, a lot of them want to leave. So how do you also get them to stay in the community and to, you know, be a mentor and to get and let the community benefit from their success and not just leave and want to move into a different neighborhood? How do you do that within the Mount Vernon Park neighborhood and with your programs?
Yeah, it's hard to do, even with students. You know, we have a student that she still comes and works with within our programs, being a model, a mentor to them and helping them. But it's hard. I think it's hard. You know, a lot of times you have this in your mind, in your mindset, that, you know, if I go somewhere else, it'll be better for me. It'll be better for my future, my family. So I guess it's a hard question. I think it's a hard answer. I wish that, you know, the calling, I guess, of somebody that really feels the call to stay there, to be there, and be part of the solution of what's going on there, I think is important. So our students really, you know, we started in 2011, so some of the students started in 3rd grade.
Right.
So some of them are just graduating from high school. They're trying, you know, going to college. Some of them, you know, my goal is to inspire them to come back, hopefully.
And I think part of it too is kind of getting back to an answer to an earlier question of just one, showing them that neighborhood can evolve and change and grow in a way that's positive. 2, letting them know that they have a role in that, or helping our community members, especially the youth, see their role in that. You know, people are playing on that playground because you built it and designed it. People are hearing a concert in that outdoor pavilion because you decided to be there.
Right.
You know, I think that's massive. And then frankly, I just think, you know, it might be hokey, but loving people, sincerely loving people. I think it's easier to come back to a place or invest in a place that has invested in you, where you felt cared about, or you feel that people want to see you grow, versus being in a place that you felt that you were succeeding in spite of. You know, and if you're succeeding in spite of being in a place, when you're ready to succeed, you want to leave,
Right.
you know, because you want to stop
Because you didn't feel that they were supporting you and were there to,
But I feel that if the place has supported you and helped lift you up and help you grow, and I will be the first to tell every high school graduate, leave. You can come back. Help be here when you get back. You know, leave, experience other things, grow your knowledge, grow your skill set, and then when you're ready, we're here. We're here. We still love you, and we welcome you back. But I think those few things, letting people know that they're important, letting them know that they're loved, and letting them know that this community can grow and change with you, is how we'll begin. And I hope we'll see it as our students begin to matriculate out of college. Hope to see them come back, at least during the summers.
So in preparation for this conversation, I actually took a drive throughout Mount Vernon and the southeast side. And so I wanted to sort of share with you some of my perceptions. And I want you to tell me, you know, call me on them or tell me if I right, or but from my observations. But overall, what I sort of got, and I was not able to talk to anyone, but you know, every house had first of all, the issue of getting kids to pick up their toys and put their bicycles away is inherent anywhere, because there were so many kids' toys and bicycles out on the yards. So the first thing there that said to me, well, you know, there are kids that live here. So everybody wants an environment where it can be safe for their kids, and that, you know, that what they want for their kids anywhere you live, regardless, is the same. The other thing I thought that was really interesting was that a lot of the homes, because of when they were built, they had front porches. And the garages were actually in the back, which was where how the alleys were created. And with the front porches, and then even if they didn't have an actual front porch, they sort of created a front porch. And that there actually bringing back into housing now, especially when they're creating housing communities for senior citizens, because having that front porch, people look out for each other. It's a way for people to connect. People get to know their neighbors. So I thought that was really interesting, and I did see quite a bit of people, and I waved. And they probably thought the Florida license plate was a little strange, and I was driving a little slowly. I think they might have thought I was lost, but they were all, some of them sitting out there, and and then I thought that idea of having that front porch and bringing it into, I think, was really important in giving that sense of neighborhood, and also the pride that a lot of people take with their homes. I mean, even with the plantings and how they, the painting of the homes. I mean, one of the things that I thought that is, if I could take any one of these homes and take it and show a picture to somebody, and they couldn't tell me what neighborhood it was in. And so I think that sort of perception of what the homes are like and how people live. But the things that I did notice was, there were no bus stops. And I kept thinking that if you live in those communities and you don't have a car, how far you have to go to get to one of the main thoroughfares where there are bus stops. And how I knew, because I, am new to Fort Wayne, so my sense of neighborhoods and where I am, I mean, I still don't know if I'm on the north side, south side. So I don't know really what neighborhoods are. And so the only way I could tell that maybe I was transitioning was because as I went up, I started to see city bus stops. So that, and the change in the sidewalk, that the sidewalks didn't have overgrown or weeds or things like that. So it was more from that standpoint that I knew a transition, not because of the houses themselves. The other thing that I thought was, and I thought this about a lot of Fort Wayne, although now with downtown, they're painting the murals and giving it more vibrancy. When I first came 3 years ago to Fort Wayne, I always thought it was very brown. The buildings are brown, and it's just gray. There's not a gray. And now with the use of the public art and the murals, but I thought that there were no energy or murals or color on the south side, which I thought was sort of ironic because everybody talks about the issue of color and race, but I really felt that was lacking, that there wasn't that kind of enthusiasm and energy that people could get from the environment that they live in. So I thought that those were, and then I did think about because there aren't a lot of, when I was driving, there aren't a lot of what you would say business corridors, or there's like the Southgate, the side where the Kroger's and stuff is, but there's not a lot of pockets where you would have office buildings and stuff. So what I noticed was that I thought that a lot of more people had home-based businesses in the community, like the child care center. At first I couldn't figure out what a level 3 or level 4 meant. But, and so I was thinking that maybe some of the opportunities, or when people think about where is more, that there are more for entrepreneurial endeavors or for people to create things out of their homes. So I was thinking that maybe that was more of where business was happening in the community.
And a lot of people travel. A lot of people are traveling to other parts of town or other sides of town to work. One of the things that occurred to me when you mentioned the kids, the bikes and the toys being outside, one thing I wanted to highlight is the bikes were outside and they stayed there,
right?
Which I think combats one of the perceptions that people have is how their families, their kids, they play outside because they feel it's safe, and they leave the bike outside because they don't think it's going to go anywhere. It'll be there when they come back. So I think that speaks well of the family-oriented nature of our community and how safe.
Right, and that they feel, because there were bikes everywhere. I mean, and I think that, and then also that people were out. I mean, people were sitting on their front porch. I mean, one person had a very nice above ground pool, and I could just see walking back and forth, or people. And there was one little boy who was riding his bike, and he must have been coming home from church. I really wanted to stop and take a picture of him, but he had denim shorts and suspenders and a little bow tie. He was the cutest. But you did see the kids out and about, and you saw them riding their bikes in the community. So you didn't feel that it wasn't hidden behind closed doors, and even the homes that I think maybe because it's not that they're run down because of the people who live in them. They're run down because they were built. The majority of them were built in the 70s, and the home care is hard, but even people took pride of where they live. I mean, I felt that there was this sense of pride and that they were proud to make a home for themselves. But one thing I did think, and I thought was interesting, I know that Bridges of Grace started, you also start businesses to help people for, to either entrepreneurial or, but you started the landscaping company. So, but one of the things I was thinking about was the idea of, sort of that we take for granted, because I guess you have to, because there was people, some that had weeds, that I guess their weeds are overgrown or their grass was overgrown, that you have to, that's part of an ordinance. Yeah. But I was thinking about, but not everybody has a lawnmower. I mean, lawnmowers are expensive. Right. So I was sort of thinking of sort of that new kind of like you can rent, that it would be nice, like if you needed like a power saw or you needed a lawnmower, that there could be a place in a community, any community, where you could go and rent those for the day. And then, right, or like because there's like a big growing trend now is a toy library where people can check out toys because when your kid is finished playing with it and then someone else. But I was thinking about that as part of the services. But tell me about how the landscaping business came about.
So everything is connected. It's amazing because the vacant lots, right? We talk about in the houses that we were getting and the beautification of the community. And so landscaping was one of the ideas because I thought, well, it all makes sense, right? We have properties that we've been buying. We need somebody to take care of them. At the same time, there is these opportunities we need to give to youth to get a job, not just youth, anybody in the neighborhood, right, who can get a job. And then the soft skills that you can teach through the work. And so we decided to do that, and hopefully this would be the first landscape, the first business under a social enterprise that what we want to create. And what you're talking about is exactly what I had in mind. Is thinking, I know my neighbor, right, who comes and sometimes she has a mower and she's excited because she has a mower, but she's a single mom, and so it's hard for her. Then when it breaks, she doesn't know how to fix it, and so it's hard. So I thought, maybe the second, one of those businesses that I'm talking about, other than landscaping, could be maybe have a shop.
Right.
Somebody who knows how to fix them, ask for people to donate mowers that are not maybe in good condition or they're not working. And if we have somebody who knows how to fix them, then that person can teach youth how to fix them as well.
And then the ones that they fixed that weren't working, then they could rent those out.
Yeah.
Or a young kid could start a service that could mow a lawn.
Or sell them for cheap. Yeah.
Right. And the other thing I thought was that in order to sort of help the neighborhood and stuff, a lot of people were working on cars in their driveways. So again, I sort of thought if you could take one of those sort of abandoned buildings or something and turn it into like a garage where people could bring the car that they're going to work on and also then teach, so that way it's not in the neighborhood, where you see people working on their cars and everything. I thought that could be a really good kind of way to bring a community together. Plus, because that's a really great skill to learn, is to be a mechanic. Right. And so then it takes the idea of having these old cars in people's driveways, which I think is part of that perception of the broken window theory. So tell me about that and the perception, people would expect, oh yes, you're going to see people working on cars in their neighborhoods. But talk about that perception and this idea of the broken window theory and how that impacts an area.
The broken window theory, of course, is what they did in New York, right? These criminologists that came with the idea of when in New York in the 90s, where the crime was so high, they came with the idea to say, well, if somebody breaks a window and nobody fixes it, it's just a signal that nobody cares, and so most likely somebody's going to come and break a second window. So what they suggested to the commissioner and the mayor and at that time is that maybe they should clean the city. So take down those buildings that are sitting empty, clean all the graffiti in the subway and everywhere. And then fix those broken windows. And so they did it, and in a term, I think it was like 2 or 3 years, the crime reduced and went down. And it's just show that it's true that when you take care, when you fix that window that is broken, it really sends a signal that somebody cares, and then there's respect, and then it multiplies too. Then more people take care of it too.
Right.
So you plant flowers and you see your neighbor, you mow your yard and you see your neighbor just
Right.
about an hour later they're mowing their
Right.
yard too.
Right,
So
because you're like, well,
it's
there,
that
I better
ripple
keep up.
effect.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that ripple effect, and so that's the broken windows theory. There's another part of the broken window theory that is not very popular.
Broken windows policing.
The policing.
Right.
Right? That is not very good. But the part of the fixing the window that is broken, mentally and psychologically makes a big difference.
Yeah, but I mean, I also think that giving people resources. So one of the things else that I noticed is there weren't a lot of public garbage cans. And so, I think that there's a study like how far in between a sidewalk there should be. So even if you wanted to throw out your cup or something, there was nowhere to throw it out.
Right.
So I thought that I noticed that as well, that there wasn't a lot. And then the other thing that I noticed was you started in the Mount Vernon Park area, these banners, the MVP that you did with the students at St. Francis, right? They created the...
No.
No? Oh, who did the banners?
The banners. So there is a small mural on one of our community parklets that was done by some of you, Frank.
Right,
St.
that was the
Francis
one that you
students.
did with the stage.
Yes.
Right.
But the banners we did in partnership with the AARP as part of an effort that we called Interconnect. The idea was to invite people to have their voices elevated in the community and to showcase our neighbors and showcase our neighborhood. So we were looking at it almost as a good news campaign so that we could celebrate just the folks in our community, celebrate the kids, showcase the diversity.
Right.
So we took photos of them. We had like a storytelling session where people talked about their story, how they came to the neighborhood, something they loved about it, things of that nature. And we had them share, like, why do you love living here? And we put those things on the back of those banners to say, our community's here, this is who we are, and we love it.
Right.
We love it. And then the front of those banners says, I am a real MVP, which is, again, me being hokey and saying,
No, I thought it was like an MVP, like the most valuable player. Like
Yes.
but it's the Mount Vernon
And for
Park.
Mondragon
I got
Park.
it. Yeah.
Exactly right. But it's us saying, yes, you are our most valuable
Right.
players. Yes, you are an important member of this community, and we want everybody to know that.
But see, that's what I thought. Why, like, I have this issue that in Fort Wayne, everybody talks about the South Side and the North Side. So I sort of feel like that's like perpetuates, West Side Story. It's, this instead of like in Chicago, people don't say they live on the South Side or the North Side. They say the neighborhood. They live in Lakewood. They live in Edgewater. They live in, the South Side is a neighborhood. So one of the things that I was thinking is, and when you go through to realize that you're not on the South Side, that you're in a different neighborhood or even downtown, like there's this little tiny thing that said historic South Wayne, and then there was one that said Renaissance Point, But I was thinking, like, if there were these banners for each of the neighborhoods, and you get people, just like they talk about people who say they live in the 07, but take it even further, for people to be proud and say what neighborhood they live in. That, I think, also perpetuates pride and distinction. And so I was thinking that those banners, that would be great. And then I would know that, now I'm in the Renaissance Point neighborhood. But also to have like even an identifier or something that tells you the history of what was known in that neighborhood or what came from that neighborhood. And at the same point of the history, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is, when you talk about that owning a home is very important, and you really work hard, and you've gotten this relationship with the Habitat for Humanity to build homes, a 5-year program, and that you're really trying to show, and that you're buying homes from the county that have been foreclosed and then redoing them, and people can then buy them at affordable prices, and the idea of how did an area like Mount Vernon Park become so much of a rental community? I mean, how did that happen? And are there like one or two big landlords of the homes, or is it a lot of hodgepodge? Because I would think if it's big, like a group who owns a large number of them, that then you could maybe work with them to get them to do things with the sidewalks or the upkeep of the homes or things like that. So I was wondering, how did that happen, that it became such this rental community, and why you think that home ownership is so important?
I think it's several reasons, but I know that one was when Harvester closed here, so the history of that Harvester, that was in the south side, and a lot of people lost their jobs, and so they had to move, and so I know that there was a hit there that was in the 90s, and so that in 2008, also when we had the recession, and then when the community started to change too, I think there was a lot, the community, South was a thriving community in the 90s and the 80s. And then the community changed, and so a lot of people, I think, started to buy a lot of homes. And I think there's one or two that are big landlords that own a bunch of homes, but there's a lot of other companies. There's more LLCs that, and unfortunately, some of them are from different states. We found one from
Different
New
countries.
Zealand.
Wow.
New Zealand LLC, and so. It is so that's what makes it difficult. It makes it difficult to be able to work with them. I do believe that ownership is important, and having a mix of income levels of people living in the same community. So
Right, to have
Yeah.
a lot of different spectrum, they say is very successful,
Right.
as is having multi-generational.
Exactly.
They found that that's very successful too for a community.
And still be able for people to rent. So what I read is that the 30% rent, if 70% is owned and 30% rent, it's a good balance that you can have, because then it creates that ownership that you talk about, the identity, right? People live there, people own their homes, so they feel part of the community. So it's very, very important. It reduces crime. And it makes a big impact when there's more 70% of ownership and 30% rental. 30% rental still means that people can afford to live there and rent there, so that's good. So yeah, that's what we want to do. Hopefully that's our goal, to be able to do that.
And it generates wealth.
Right.
I just want to acknowledge that. It generates wealth. In a lot of our homes in our neighborhood, people are paying $500, $600 plus a month to live in a home where if you had a mortgage,
It would be less than that.
it would be less than half of that in many cases. And freeing up that much of someone's income to
Right.
invest in their children, to invest in
Right.
their own career and well-being, to invest in, whatever, a new business, could be a tremendous change for our neighborhood, for the community, and for the families living in it.
Well, that's also the issue of helping people build wealth.
Yes.
And there's that, from that economic discrepancy is the wealth issue. It's not just money.
Right.
So, yeah. So at the end of each of And Good Company shows, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust made popular from a Victorian parlor game. And Proust believed that by answering these questions, the person reveals their true selves. So I'm going to ask you, and then you each can, so if you're, Rena, you're going to get time to think about them. But what is your favorite word?
Go ahead, just start.
Love.
Love, I would say, lately it's been intentionality.
Intentionality.
Create.
What is your least favorite word?
Hate.
It makes it easy. I would say wrong.
Wrong?
Yeah, so the people to tell you that you're wrong.
You're
if
wrong,
not
right,
you.
right.
Can't.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Hope.
My family.
I think creation itself, like God's creation, people, environments, all of it.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Closed-mindedness.
Yeah, people not willing to listen.
Probably the same.
These are tough.
This is tough
What
right
sound
now.
or noise do you love?
Cheeseburgers frying.
On the grill or in the kitchen?
In the kitchen.
Okay.
I love that.
No, birds for me. Yeah. I love
Laughter for me.
What sound or noise do you hate?
The kids arguing over the pettiest things that you could imagine.
I don't know. Yeah, they have somebody fighting. I don't. Yeah.
Probably the loud motorcycles at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Morning.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Politics?
Okay.
Okay.
Well, we might have a future leader here. You know, we need some people to run for
I
office.
think I do it by default, but
Right.
We know that. I always wanted to be a chef before I became a pastor, so chef, I guess.
Right on. I found my kindergarten yearbook, and I always said I wanted to be a ballerina.
Okay.
So maybe I'll go into ballet.
What profession would you not like to do?
Politician.
Politics.
You would say a politician?
Yeah, I don't.
Right.
I don't know. I'm curious about way too many things. Maybe, I don't know, I wouldn't be a hermit. I wouldn't be secluded.
Okay. So we would send you to Antarctica or something.
No, I'm not going to be the one who launches to Mars or anything.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Wow. Overcoming the environmental factors that could have put my life on a different path.
I don't know. I feel this satisfaction that I'm in the right place right now, doing
You're content.
what God, I always really do at the time. Right?
For me, just helping people realize that they can. That they can change things, that they can move forward, that they can grow. That makes me happy.
Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
Wow. I'd probably say Tupac Shakur.
All right.
I don't know. I think right now for the situation, Martin Luther King Jr. and then Malcolm Gladwell. Right now, I love his podcast.
Right. Well, Malcolm Gladwell, you might be able to get to have a conversation with. Right.
Yeah, that's a good one. My dad. I miss that guy.
How would you like to die?
Peacefully.
Sleeping.
Yeah, in my sleep.
Best.
In a dream.
Peacefully as well.
And if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well done, my good and faithful servant.
Same.
Well, I want to thank you all for, I feel like we have just barely touched the surface of what Bridges of Grace does and what impact you're having on the transformation of the South Side and the Mount Vernon neighborhood. So I want to thank you. And I want to thank you all and invite you to come and enjoy a seat at the table next time for great conversation and good company.